Hi everybody, this is Mr. Pinner, and we're going to take a look at the events in the Pacific after Pearl Harbor. If you recall, the Philippines were considered to be one of the main targets and believed to be hit before Pearl Harbor. And there had been a military buildup waiting for an attack, but that attack did not happen until the day after of Pearl Harbor. And MacArthur had been building up for this, and because of a lack of a few things, they were still kind of caught by surprise. In fact, the first invasion force by the Japanese managed to destroy half of the aircraft on the ground within 45 minutes. The Japanese main objective in trying to get a hold of the Philippines was to prevent the U.S. from having a military base to launch an attack on Japan. The second was to have a staging and supply area that they could use to further their invasion of the East Indies, and also to keep a line of communication open between the South and the Japanese homeland. So basically just sort of expand their empire a little bit more. MacArthur, who was in charge of the Philippines, does the best job he can with the resources he has, and it's pretty much not a good sign. They're going to manage to hold out for about 4 months, and MacArthur ends up withdrawing to what becomes known as the Bataan Peninsula. And it is on that peninsula that the decision is made to evacuate MacArthur, that if he falls into the hands of the Japanese, that is going to further weaken the hand that the United States has to play against the Japanese, because he is considered to be of strategic importance. The U.S. is going to send in 3 PT boats, and they're going to do a covert operation at night. They're going to go in at full throttle, roughly about 40-some knots, and they land. They manage to get MacArthur, his family, and I believe his dog off, and then hightail it out of there before the Japanese realize what happens. It is what happens next to the U.S. forces along with the Filipino forces that becomes known as the Bataan Death March. And it is during this death march that the U.S. surely has a low morale. When the Japanese forces finally were able to capture the Philippines, the Filipinos and American prisoners of war were going to be marched to their final destination, which became known as Camp O'Donnell, which was going to be a POW camp. And it varies on the amount of fatalities, anywhere between 2,500 to 10,000 Filipinos and 100 to 650 Americans were going to die before they could reach that destination. Main reason why it was going to have such a high amount of fatalities is because the Japanese were not ready for such a large amount of soldiers. So when they started to march, the Japanese didn't supply them with food or water. So many of them are going to die because of heat and exhaustion along the way. And for the first 3 days of the march, they weren't allowed to have any food, and they were only able to drink water from the ditches along the side of the road. And the Japanese troops also beat the individuals to get them to move, and bayoneted those individuals who fell behind and unable to walk. And they also, at times, used their samurai swords and actually beheaded many of the soldiers. Very, very nasty crimes for human beings. Japanese culture at the time basically said that those individuals that surrendered were to be treated as non-human beings. So this is going to explain some of the treatment that the POWs are going to have. They were treated as subhuman or animal-like. Some of the trucks that were known to have driven over some of those soldiers who had fallen or had succumbed to fatigue, and they were finally taken to a train station, put on boxcars that were unventilated. And if you can think about the sweltering heat because of the location of the Philippines, and there were no sanitation facilities, disease took a very, very heavy toll on them. And they were finally taken off the railway cars. They marched their final 9 miles to Camp O'Donnell. And even after all of that, the POWs died at a rate of roughly about 30 to 50 per day, basically leading to thousands more to die. The Japanese later would be brought up on war crimes for this. With the attack on Pearl Harbor and the fall of the Philippines, U.S. morale as an all-time low, including the military morale, which is the main thing that they were trying to boost. A man by the name of James Doolittle, who is a member of the Army Air Corps, has a daring raid that he wants to do. And he believes by using some B-25s to take off of an aircraft carrier, they can inflict some damage onto Tokyo and then sort of boost the morale. The idea is to show Japan that we still have the ability to reach out and still hit you. And one of the problems is that the B-25 is not designed to take off a carrier. There are no steam catapults. The B-25 is going to have to use what is basically known as power braking. And they are basically lined up, and you're going to put your best pilot in the very front, and he is going to have a very short distance before he can take off, and he has to be at the optimum airspeed in order to take off. He doesn't have the idea of a few extra feet, and he could do it. So it's going to be extreme training, and it is unknown if this is actually going to succeed.
U.S. military morale is in need of a boost. The troops are in the mood for a fight. The Army's B-25 bombers could reach Japan, but the massive planes are designed for airfields, not aircraft carriers. To make room for the huge bombers, USS Hornet's fighter planes are stowed beneath, leaving it defenseless. That's where USS Enterprise comes in.
With the flight deck being occupied by the U.S. Army medium bombers, the Hornet could do nothing. So, USS Enterprise went along to provide overall security.
Admiral William Halsey's plan makes it possible for the Army bombers to take off, led by Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle. The target, Tokyo. The catch, bombers have to be within 400 miles of Japan, so they'll have enough fuel to return safely to land. But when Japanese intelligence detects U.S. carriers at sea, the B-25s have no choice but to launch early. While the physical damage is minimal, the psychological impact on Japan is enormous.
The Japanese Navy was horrified that the Emperor had been theoretically placed in personal danger by these attacks. There were bombers over Tokyo.
Japanese propaganda downplayed the effects of the Doolittle raid, stressing the trivial military results and reassuring the public that such an attack would not befall Japan again.
It's only behind the scenes within the Japanese military that you see the true level of consternation that that attack had provoked.
After the Doolittle raid, Japan's determined to annihilate the Enterprise and destroy the Allies' ability to reach Japan's home islands. The result, the Battle of Midway, and the turning point of the war in the Pacific.
So, doing a quick recap here, the fight in the Pacific. It is a day after Pearl Harbor that the Philippines is attacked, and they're going to hold out for almost 5 months. General Douglas MacArthur is ordered to evacuate to Australia because of his strategic importance. And with the Bataan Death March, it is a 55-mile plus march to POW Camp O'Donnell. And a combined total of over 7,000 American and Filipinos are going to die on the march. And because of the morale being low, with Doolittle's raid, the idea of bombing Tokyo, it is mainly a morale boost not a strategic attack.